Hi, and welcome to Untethered with Jen Liss, the podcast that's here to help you break free, be you, and unleash your inner brilliance. I'm your host, Jen, and in this episode, we're going to talk about how to embrace your imperfection to have more joy and less stress on the road to success. Let's dive in. Hey there, unicorn. It's Jen. Welcome back to the podcast. Today's guest, I'm so excited to introduce you to. Her name is Dawn Calvinisti. So Dawn has a soft place in her heart for people pleasers, perfectionists, and procrastinators. Can you identify as any one of those three people? Do you find yourself pleasing, wanting things to be perfect, or procrastinating? I know that I most certainly do all of these things sometimes. And in my life, I have found myself sometimes maybe disliking these pieces of myself, disliking those parts, wanting to push them away, wanting to push them aside, and shaming them. And I hear from so many women and men, all kinds of people who struggle with this same thing. And so Dawn is here on the podcast today to help you write a huge permission slip to love those parts of yourself, and also how to deal with the more negative side of them that we struggle with. So Dawn has a lot of varied background in natural health. She's owned multiple businesses as a doula, a childbirth educator, a homeopath, and eventually an essential oil-based network marketing business that she took into the top 3% in under 3 years. Multiple six figures. She knows how to run a business. She knows how to be successful. And she also coaches women to do the same. And she knows that these 3 Ps are the things that are often holding people back. So in this conversation, we discuss why is that? We discuss the potentially bright side of these things and how you can make progress even today, even if you have no idea what it is the next thing that you might want to do. So everyone, without further ado, welcome onto the podcast, Dawn Calvinisti. Hi, Dawn.
Hey, Jen. I'm so excited to be here and share.
Well, I'm thrilled to have you on the podcast to share because you are here to talk about 3 things that almost every human on this planet definitely struggles with. And a lot of the listeners on my podcast, I know, struggle with it. So we're going to dive right into that. You talk a lot about what you call the 3 Ps. What are the 3 Ps? And why is this something that you like to talk about?
Yeah, I like to talk about it because it really does apply to almost everybody. But the 3 Ps are people pleasing, procrastination, and perfectionism. And the reality is perfectionism is the umbrella over all 3 of these. And we'll kind of dive a little bit into that. And I love to talk about this because when people tell me they're stuck, or in your case, tethered, right? It's always the fact that there is some perfectionism creeping in one of these areas, and they just can't get past it. And sometimes they don't even recognize that that's what it is.
Okay. I can't wait to dive into this deeper and deeper, because a lot of us think of these as definitely 3 separate things. And you're saying, okay, but it's the perfectionism that is really causing it. So explain that a little deeper.
Yeah. So let's take perfectionism and put it into each of the areas, starting with people pleasing. So generally, my people pleasers, and I want to say even before we get into it, all of these have good sides. So we'll cover that maybe a little later, but I don't want you to think as you're hearing this that because I'm saying you get stuck, that you want to totally get rid of them. Okay. So we'll dive a little more there later. But the idea of people pleasing usually comes from earlier in childhood, things that you have just felt like, I will fit in or I will be applauded if I go along and make people happy, or if people approve of me, I feel better about myself. And so my value, my worth is then based on what other people say or think about me. And so perfectionism in that sense comes into the fact that either we feel like we have to do things perfectly or just so in order for people to accept us and appreciate us or applaud us or, tell us that we're doing the right thing. Or perfectionism comes in because we feel like when we please others, how can I do that even better to get them to like me even more? And so then again, we increase that feeling of I need to do it just right so that I will fit in and be loved and accepted and all of that. So do you get how that would be perfectionism?
Yeah, that makes total, when you describe it that way, it makes total sense. Yeah.
Okay, so then if we move to perfectionism that I call a separate P, it's really the high achiever. And again, that's not a bad thing. But when perfectionism is, I have to do it perfectly or so well that I won't release it unless I do it that way, or I won't try it unless I do it that way. And I will compare where I'm at to everybody else's results, whether they're, 10 years ahead of me or 10 steps ahead of me. All of that becomes that I need to do it perfectly. And that can be on us, that we feel like I have to do it just right. And often it will then creep into you have to do it just right because you're not doing it my way, which is the perfect way. And rarely does a perfectionist think that they are perfect. So that's another kind of funny part of it. Perfectionists don't usually think they're perfect, but they try to achieve perfection. And so that's really, really high standards for themselves, high expectations for themselves, and often for others as well around them. And then the third one, which is the procrastinator, if you think about being someone who wants everything just right, perfect, put it out in a way that isn't going to embarrass them, isn't going to make them ashamed, isn't going to make them feel unworthy or unloved or not accepted or not fitting in, if you can't do it to that degree, it's better not to do it at all. Or maybe I'll hedge, or maybe I'll just take another course, another program. I'll try something else. I need more information. I can't quite do it perfectly. So I'm going to spend a lot of time spinning my wheels and racing around in circles in my head. And I'm going to delay and delay and delay. And there's our procrastinator.
Okay. I think that there's probably a lot of people going, because I am, so let's back up and hear, why are you personally, like, are you a perfectionist? Are you a procrastinator? Are you a, overachiever? Like, what are the things that you yourself have done that have led you to this point of being so passionate about talking about these things?
Yeah, absolutely. So as a kid, as a child, I was raised in a home with a lot of expectations. I lived in a family where my parents' jobs were looked at by a lot of people around them. And so our family was also looked at and held up as a standard for their families, for their children. And so I was compared. And so I often was feeling like I was living in a fishbowl, everybody observing, and every little mistake, every little thing I didn't say or do right, everybody knew in the community. And so that right away started to box me in. And I felt like I had to people please to make sure that I was the right kid in my family for everybody that was watching. And it might look one way for one person, another way for another. And so I was constantly shape-shifting to be able to fit and to please everybody, including my parents. And then out of that, of course, the perfectionism kicked in because I had to do it just right because they wouldn't like me if I didn't, or I would embarrass my family or shame my parents, or I just wouldn't fit into the community. And so it was a pretty harsh lesson, to be honest. I mean, my parents were awesome and I had a great upbringing, but it was just the way our situation was that made it more of that feeling of being looked at so closely that I needed to fit in. And that didn't really change for me through my teen years. I married very young, and I married somebody who also I wanted to please. I wanted them to be, happy with me. I wanted to do things just right so that I would be as good as their mom, my mother-in-law, right? Like all these things that I just put on myself as expectations, none really being said out loud, right? This is just perceived from what's coming around my community. And that obviously did not work well, because eventually you realize, and my ex-husband realized, I wasn't really anybody. I was everything to everybody, and I didn't really know who I was. And so how can I be authentic and real and vulnerable, well, I couldn't. And so we ended up divorcing, and it took me, I would say, almost 12 years of really weeding through all of my garbage with, counselors, therapists, on my own, doing some coaching to really get a grasp of who I was, what I wanted, what I liked, what my preferences were, what mattered to me, what didn't matter to me, and then to start building that backbone of setting boundaries and saying no and learning that I could love me and it didn't matter what anybody else thought. So that's really why I'm really passionate, especially working with women, because we often put ourselves at the bottom of the list, and we do tend to shift a bit to feel like we're in the community we're in, whatever it is. And so I think for me, it's so important that we not spend our lives hiding behind a mask or wearing many masks, and that we really know who we are and what we want, so that at the end of the day, we don't look back at our life and think, like, I don't even know if I enjoyed my life. I don't even know if I liked anything. There's things I wish I had done. I didn't even think of doing them because I was so busy trying to be everything to everyone.
Mm-hmm. There's so much at stake. And if you had not come back home to yourself untethered, as I would describe it, if you had not, realized I'm wearing so many masks, you said this idea of I'm being everyone to everybody and also nothing at all. You're not being yourself. What do you think would have happened?
Really, I think at the end of the day, you either have to choose to kind of turn a blind eye, like literally just pretend that everything's fine, because it doesn't feel good. And you can feel something's wrong. But if you never really choose to look at it, I think I would have probably just kept my head down and told myself it's okay and just keep moving forward and be on the hamster wheel and stay tethered. And that way I don't have to actually check what the problem is. So if I hadn't been willing to explore, I think it would have been just a life that was of drudgery and feeling really unknown and lonely and constantly feeling not worthy, because I would always be checking on what others were thinking in order to decide, was I good enough each day?
Yeah. It's not easy in either direction, right? Choosing to untether is challenging, and moving forward in that way it feels miserable to me. I personally felt like I had no choice but to move forward with unmasking, because it was just like there was just something calling so hard on my heart. Something that you said that I'm so passionate about is that I also had an amazing upbringing, amazing parents. They're still together. They're amazing people. I have an amazing family. I love my siblings so, so much. And still, I have a lot of challenge. I mask the crap out of myself. I'm a middle child who felt like I had two sisters who were a little bit wild and drove my dad crazy. So I felt like I had to be the perfect child. And a lot of us we all have our different family dynamics. We can feel shame sometimes over admitting that something doesn't feel right to us, or admitting that we might not feel ourselves. Do you experience that? Have you experienced that yourself? Have you experienced that with any of your clients and in having some of these conversations about the 3 Ps?
Yeah, one of the things that comes up a lot is the idea of like not really knowing when we're in that state, not really knowing, is it me or is it them? Because again, like not being sure, I think I'm being me because I'm doing all the things to be approved, right? I'm doing all the right things that I believe are right. So it probably isn't me. And so maybe it is them and they don't really like me, or they don't really understand me. So I need to try even harder, which just, again, makes the cycle go and go and go. And there's a lot of that disconnect because we don't truly know who are we underneath all of this.
Yeah. Why is it worth it to find out?
So really the bottom line for me, for my situation and for clients that I worked with, is once you're free of trying to be everything to everyone, trying to be that perfect person, you get to have this perspective on life where you feel like you're making the decisions. You get to decide what's good for you today, what you want to do to help others, and what you want to say no to. And there's such power in that because it allows you to start to feel like, okay, when I do something for somebody else, I genuinely want it. There's no bitterness there. There's no resentment that I feel like I have to in order to have that kind of reciprocation where they'll like me and I'll like them. You feel so much more free, and you're not constantly checking, am I wearing the right mask today? So there's no slip up, right? You're honestly you. You're all integrity. And so there's none of that. The more you hide, the more you have to build, right? So you're always making sure, did I say the right thing? Did I say the wrong thing? What did I say last week to them? What did they say back? How did that look? Do I need to change what I'm saying today? Like, it just makes life so much simpler, or it removes the overwhelm. It allows you to relax and allows you to really feel like when you speak from a place of knowing yourself, then the world lines up. And when you're not aligned, it just always feels off.
I can feel just this shift even as you're speaking. You comforted me, which makes sense why you're such an amazing mentor and coach and really help to support people through this process. Because when you very first started talking about it, I could feel this kind of like the idea of being free and to be making your own decisions. It seems a little scary. It feels a little scary at first. So what would you just say to somebody who might feel like, ooh, that seems scary?
It's normal, first of all. And if you haven't made decisions based on your own understanding of you and what your likes and dislikes are and your preferences, you may not even know what to say anyway. So when you're starting out on this discovery, I think every part feels a little scary. So the question I always say that is, I guess, the first one to uncover, the first one to look at is, if I was here alone today, I had nobody to do anything for today, just me, what would be something I would choose to do? There's nobody watching me. I'm not with anybody. My family's not here. There's nobody around me. What would I choose to do? And it's one of the hardest questions to answer because our mind instantly goes to what we should be doing, what somebody's expecting you to do. But when you can start digging there and uncovering what are the things that are actually things you want for yourself, that you enjoy, that you would take time out of your day for, that's where the breadcrumbs start to come in. And you can keep asking yourself that day after day after day and start putting the pieces together of who are you really?
Yeah, there's such a lightness in that question too. That's a beautiful question because it's going to lead you to something that lights you up, right? So it's like whenever we get scared, we can always turn into the light. And that's an amazing question. Can I ask you you've obviously answered this question a time or two to yourself and helped other people through it. But if you were to do anything today, nobody's watching, what would it be for you today?
I would read. I would lay probably on the couch and read.
Yeah.
And that's a hard thing for me. In the past, that was hard to give myself permission because I wasn't doing anything for anyone and it wasn't getting me anywhere. So to be able to allow myself to relax and do something that had no purpose in my mind was the hardest thing.
Yeah, I've heard of somebody who hosts these retreats. You may have heard of them where they're all reading retreats. You don't have to talk to anybody. You don't even have to leave your room. In fact, the whole directive is read. So if you think about that, a lot of times I'm supporting people in what is it that I really love to do in this world? What am I here to do? That question that you just asked is such an amazing question for guiding you to that, because that person may have had somebody such as yourself ask them that question, what would you do? And then they crafted a whole retreat series off of that idea. Like, all I want to do is read. I just want permission to read. So it's really beautiful. So when it comes to, you mentioned the idea of the 3 Ps potentially being something good. I think it's really easy to look at, perfectionism and procrastination and people pleasing as, these negative things that we just want to get rid of. So share, what is it about them that is a good thing, as you say?
I love this part because every time somebody perceives something negative about themselves, it's like we have to rip it out and throw it away, and we don't ever want to be that. And I think the reality is we're all different, and we all have areas where we tend to gravitate to. And some have more of a negative end, some have more of a positive end, but all of them serve a purpose. So with the 3 Ps, people pleasing is generally because you want others to feel good. You want them to be made comfortable, to feel like their needs are being addressed. Probably you're extra generous. You're probably somebody who is a little more emotional and sensitive towards others. And those are really, really good traits. When you think about it, when you're a people pleaser, you probably know what somebody else needs before they even ask for it. So to have that gift and that talent, that is awesome. And it shouldn't be thrown out. Like, keep that part of your people pleasing, right? Like, who doesn't want a friend that reaches out and hands them the tissue before they start crying? Like, how awesome that you know me so well that you can offer what I'm needing. So people pleasers are super emotionally intelligent around people. We only want to look at the parts that are holding you back or keeping you tethered. So in this case, those are good things, and we don't need to get rid of them. And also the fact that maybe you're a little more that way because of your upbringing or whatever happened in your life to make you more aware of others. Again, that was a learning lesson. So when you learned how to gauge what are others looking for from me, that's a talent. Like, that's a skill. Often people that are working in businesses like marketing or are doing things like verbally with people eye to eye, that is something they train in order to have those tells and to be able to read people. So those are awesome skills that you've probably worked on for decades and don't even realize how good you are at it. And it can really help you in your job, with family, with communication, with partners, with relationships, right? So again, awesome skills and talents in that. And then we have those perfectionists, those high achievers, which again, what is wrong with wanting to do a good job? Nothing. That is so great that you want to do your best and that what you want to put out is going to be something that is really well done, that people are going to look at and be like, oh, wow, okay, so I would like to learn how to do that. I wish I had that organizational talent or that skill set of being able to look at something and know this is the way it needs to go. So those are good things. And most high achievers are also driven, on their own. They don't necessarily need much accountability. They're able to come through. You give them a task, they complete it. You say that this is needed and I'm not sure how, they'll figure out the steps and break it down. Those are awesome skills and talents. So again, embrace those. Those are great things. So when you're tethered and you're thinking you have to do it perfectly, that's going to impede you. But if you're thinking about how can I do it well, or I've already put it out there into the world and now I want to do it better, what are things I can tweak? Perfectionism comes in really, really, really well to do those things. And then you have those procrastinators, which again, this is the one where I think most people are like, there's nothing good about procrastinating. But it's not true, because procrastination is taking time. And many times, especially if you're a little more intuitive, your gut check is telling you something is off. And that's okay. If something is off and maybe this is not the right time to do something, or something needs to be done first before you head into that, or you need to double check it with somebody else that maybe has a better grasp on it so that you really do understand what needs to be done, and then you can go forward. Those are all good reasons to procrastinate. Again, if you're tethered and you're procrastinating because of the things we talked about where you have to do it perfectly and so you're not going forward, or you just think, you're comparing to everybody else and therefore I'm not ready to put it out yet, or I need every single course that's on the internet possible before I'm going to put out, then again, that's not going to be helpful. But if it's because there is that gut check, or I know that I'm doing this in a way that is not going to benefit, and so I just need to take a little more time and do A, B, or C in order to do that, those are good reasons to procrastinate. And also, sometimes procrastination kicks in because you don't like what you're about to do. And there's nothing about it that's going to change. Many times, I would say for me personally, that's one of my biggest reasons to procrastinate. I don't like it. If in my business, if I have to do all the social media, I will procrastinate. I know that about myself. So learning from your procrastination, is it something I'm avoiding? Do I not like it? Is it something that drives me crazy? What thoughts go in my head when this topic comes up? So I stop doing it or I don't even start. Those are things that, one, you can get counseling on, you can get coaching on, you can learn yourself about yourself and decide to delegate those tasks or do them differently, or figure out a different way around it that will make you feel more light when you do have to do it. So lots of great reasons for all of these P's that are positive.
Ah, Dawn, you just untethered us from our own P's because the shame that we can feel around, oh, I'm such a perfectionist. Oh, I'm such a procrastinator. I'm such a people pleaser. These are just things that when we dislike something about ourselves or feel like we need to push it away or just get rid of it, that actually tethers us because it's a piece of you. It's a part of you. And there's such good things. Like everything that we have has light and dark. There's a shadow side to every single thing. And you've just shown so much light on these three things that so many people struggle with. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. And to add, if I can, to the procrastination piece, I speak about this a lot with my own coaching clients. It's often a signal. It's a signal. And that's exactly what you were saying. I believe in one of your points is that it could be signaling to you that you've got something, you've got a trigger, or you've got something that, you're afraid of. There might be a fear that's coming up that you can work through. And it could simply be that you don't like it. I love that you said that. It could just be, this isn't for you. This isn't for you. You're engaging in it, but is it even something that you want to do? Yeah, that's such a beautiful question.
And like you were saying, like when the shame piece comes up, I think often even calling yourself, right, a perfectionist. I hear people say like, I'm a recovering perfectionist, or, I procrastinate so much, or I'm such a procrastinator. And labeling ourselves with these things doesn't help the situation because none of these are thought of in a good light, which is the part that bothers me, because you're right. There is a light and a shadow to every one of them. And to be able to say like, I like to do things perfectly, I don't think that's a bad thing. Again, to have that desire to do things really well. Now, the reality is there's no such thing as perfect. I mean, every time you think it's perfect, you're going to create a new bar that's even higher because you're going to want to change it, do it differently, tweak something, and then that's the new perfect. And then when you hit that, the same thing's going to happen. So it's this moving goal. So as long as you're recognizing that when you're saying like, I want to do things perfectly, or, I tend to be a perfectionist, understand what that really is meaning. Are you saying, I really do think that I can be perfect? That's going to be a problem. Or are you saying, I really love doing things to the best of my ability and I try to get the resources behind me to be able to do that? That's different. So I think we need to kind of embrace the idea that if you tend to run that way, what are the things about that are really good things that you can embrace and enjoy and use to move you forward so that you do feel so good about yourself rather than shaming yourself with that label and picking all the negative to hang on to as parts of you?
Yeah, such a great reframe. So, question for you on your journey. Was there a moment that you came to kind of ahead for yourself of realizing that you're masking and pleasing? And was there just a moment in your journey where you just really looked at it and were like, what the heck is going on here?
Yeah, sadly, my second husband got the brunt of it. So this is kind of a funny story, but the poor guy, as I was starting to realize, okay, here I am in a second marriage and some of the same stuff is coming up. And we know if we don't deal with things, right, the same things will show up to teach you yet again. But for me, it was always, it's not me, it's them, because I'm doing everything right. It's my perfectionism kicking in, but I would never have told you that I was a perfectionist because I knew I could never get it right. It was never good enough. So if you think to yourself and you're listening to this and you're thinking, I'm not a perfectionist. Like, I don't think that way. Some of the things you could be asking yourself are, do I expect myself to get it right the first time? Do I expect myself to know how to do things I haven't done before? Do I expect myself to walk into a room, maybe to learn something, and I'm afraid to put up my hand to ask a question because I don't want people to know that I don't know anything, even though I don't know anything about the topic, right? So there's just some things that you can start checking. And also, do you use the word perfect? Do you use the word? So for me, as I started to disassemble this creation that I had made of myself, and my husband and I, the second time around, we're going to counseling together to make sure that things were, in better shape than the first time around. And I realized as we were having these conversations and the same words were coming out of my mouth, the same issues were coming back up. Okay, you know what? The common denominator here is me, because I was in both of these marriages. And the common issue I'm having is I think you don't know me. And I'm trying so hard to do everything just right so you'll be happy, and you're still not happy with me. So what am I doing wrong? And the best question ever in a counseling session was when the counselor turned and said to me, so if you feel like you're doing everything that you can to make this a great relationship, what is it that you think you need to do differently to make a change and get this to be what you want it to be? And as soon as she said that, like I probably took 2 or 3 minutes just sitting there thinking. And I had no idea, because I had no idea what I actually wanted the relationship to look like. I had no clue. I just wanted to be happy. And that's all I could say. I'm like, I don't know. I just thought it would be easier and I'd be happy. And so she said to me, so what does happiness look like to you? I didn't know. I had no idea. I'm like, I don't know. We don't fight. She's like, okay, so why does not fighting matter to you? I don't know. And so as she kept unpacking that and just continuing to ask me, what does that mean to you? What does that look like for you? What would that feel like? I had no answers. And that was the very start of me understanding that I had been everything to everyone. All of my answers that were on the tip of my tongue weren't things I actually felt. They were just things I'd done. Like, I think I should be able to, not have to make dinner every night, but because he wants dinner every night, I make dinner every night. Okay, so my answer is, well, I think I should make dinner every night and he should come home and be happy with the dinner I make. And because it was what I'd done, but I actually didn't enjoy any of that. So starting to understand that just because I've always done it a certain way, just because I thought it was the way it needed to be done, was not meaning that's what I actually wanted my life to look like. And so starting to understand, okay, so what to me means I'm having a good life, that I'm enjoying my life, that my days are good, that I feel happy, that I'm content in who I am. And it took, like I said, almost 12 years to unpack those questions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Are there any shortcuts, Dawn?
Oh my goodness. Really, really, it goes back to that whole thing of asking yourself, like, what would you do if you had no expectations from anyone on you? What would you do if nobody was watching? If you could live in a bubble for 24 hours, what would that be for you? And I think you do have to start asking yourself those questions, because until we can really get down to what it is that makes us feel satisfied inside, what is it that makes us feel like, oh, this is a good feeling for me. This makes me happy. This makes me feel fulfilled. This makes me feel like I have purpose. This is what makes me light up. We really don't know who we are until we can start answering some of those questions and then implementing some of those things into our life.
Yeah. I shared on Instagram the other day, there was this post that I had shared a few years ago that said, "Hi, I'm Jen and I have no idea who I am," because I was at that point that you're talking about right now, where it's like, okay, I've noticed 2 times is a pattern. I don't need a third time. I was in a job where I was unsatisfied. I'm like, okay, yours was your relationship and it can be all of these different things. It's like, I don't know who I am. And that question that you have, I'm so fortunate that I had found a coach who asked a very similar type of question to what you're posing here for everybody to answer for themselves. That really brings you back home to you. What do I care about? And to have grace for yourself if you don't know the answer to that question, because sometimes we don't, and we have to allow it to simply the time and the space, a little procrastination, let it surface on its own.
That's right. And the other thing too, when you're asking these questions is there's no rush here, right? The truth of all of this is if you want to discover who you are, it will take time to unpack it, especially if you've been living under this since you were young, right? If you're in your 30s or you're in your 40s, there's some decades there worth of belief systems that have really cemented in. And often those beliefs about what we need to do and how we need to behave are so deeply entrenched that we truly do believe this is who I am. This is what I like. This is what I do because it's what I like. And to be able to actually say to yourself, okay, so do I eat dinner at this time because I like dinner at this time? Or do I do it because I've done it for 25, 35 years? Right? It's little things. You start to realize, okay, this maybe isn't something I would choose now, but I've always thought that's how it was done. And so I continue to do it. And so there's so many, like literally from making silly decisions, like what time you want to have dinner, to big things like, is this the job I really want to be in? Is this a relationship that I want to be in? Is this how I want to look, to dress, to conduct myself when I'm around people? There's so many parts of our life that we're looking at that it's not going to happen in a day, a week, a couple of months. It takes time, and it's okay to allow yourself lots of grace and compassion as you go through it.
Dawn, you have written us the biggest permission slip today. Thank you so much for everything that you have shared. I think if there's just, it's impossible that people aren't relating to all of this and everything that you have shared. Is there anything that you would just love to impart that you haven't yet in today's conversation to somebody who identifies as any of the 3 Ps, or just anybody who's identifying with any part of your story in this conversation?
I think it still comes back to allowing yourself to be as you are right now today. There's no pressure to have to make this change. There's no expectation that if you haven't figured out how to not people please, or you haven't figured out how not to be a perfectionist or not to procrastinate, that you're doing it wrong. And somehow, life is going to be worse because you didn't figure it all out. The truth of it is, if you're even listening right now, you are already interested in finding out and living a life that you can feel really good in, and that you can affect people in, and that you can leave a legacy in. And that is what begins everything. It's when we don't bother, right? When we put our head down, like Jen and I were saying at the beginning, we could have just put our head down, ignored all the signs, and just grind on, hoping that we make it to the end of the day. But you're not that. You're listening. So 1, congratulations, and give yourself a pat on the back. And 2, allow it to happen as you're able to do it, because it can feel like all of a sudden you recognize things, and I've got to change. I've got to make these decisions. I've got to get it done because I'm wasting time. But the reality is you're taking the time to decide exactly what you want life to be like for you. And that's okay if you take time to do it.
We try to do self-development perfectly.
Exactly.
Okay, final question, Dawn. Where do you see the magic in the world?
Oh, I like this question. For me, the magic really is in serving. Like I live in Guatemala. So I've had a lot of opportunity with our family to be in a place where we can really recognize what we have and the privilege we have and the excess that we have, and to be able to reach out to people that don't understand things. Like for us, we give in all different ways, but some of the most basic things is being able to educate people, being able to open their eyes to a different way, being able to offer hope and the idea that they can have better lives for their children, better lives for themselves, more awareness of what they need. So here in Guatemala, often it revolves around things like their food choices and nutrition and medical care and things like that. And anytime, same thing working with coaching clients, to see the light bulb switch on and having somebody have an aha moment. And then, like we were just saying, being able to say, okay, now that I get that that's something that's an option for me, I want to explore it. And that for me totally is the magic when people have that, okay, I want to take a closer look at this and see what I really want for my life.
Oh, that's such a beautiful answer. And we didn't dive into this. The fact that you and your family live in Guatemala and you were in Canada previously, right? That's a huge move. Can I ask, how did you give yourself permission? What drove you to make that decision to move there?
Oh boy. Well, definitely letting go of perfectionism. I can tell you that. That was a huge, huge jump again in that. But for us, my husband comes from Guatemala originally, although he lived over half his life in Canada and we met in Canada. But we had been doing a lot of volunteer work, bringing different ambulances and fire trucks and medical equipment and supplies down to Guatemala. And we realized we really needed to be on the ground there to be able to do more in that area. And there came a point where we had come down to visit and we went back to Canada and we just could not shake the feeling that we could be doing so much more with our resources and our time and our energy in Guatemala than we were at that moment in Canada. And we just talked about it. It took us about 3 months after our return where we just said, that's it. Let's sell the house and go for a year. And, kids were picking up. You're going to miss possibly a year of school, but we feel the need to do this. And we did. We literally left a few boxes at a friend's with our bikes and left and went to Guatemala. And here we are almost 4 years later, still here.
Wow, that's an amazing story. I love hearing the stories of people who do that because for so long, that was something that I just said, someday I want to live somewhere other than Kansas. And it took my husband and I, 38 years of our lives to finally make the move and do it. And it's such a huge decision. Some people move all the time and it doesn't feel like a big decision, but it did for us. And so thank you for sharing that. And I know a lot of listeners too, like there's a lot of wanderlust in this group of people. We love to travel and we love to do, and that idea of moving calls on the hearts of so many. So thank you for sharing. It's really interesting though, too, that it's like that service, that light that just keeps drawing you and it propels you forward and into motion. Thank you, Dawn, so much for coming on the podcast and sharing everything that you've shared. It's just been so beautiful having you on.
Thank you again, Jen. I love talking with you every time. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to your listeners.
Yeah. Where can people find you and connect with you?
The easiest would be Instagram. You can find me at Pursue Progress with Dawn on there, or my website, which is pursueprogress.com.
Yes. And you have an amazing podcast. I got to come on your podcast recently. It was so much fun. So where can people find your podcast?
Any of your platforms that you listen to podcasts on, we are Imperfection in Progress.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed this conversation about the 3 Ps and you took something away for yourself, whether you identify as a people pleaser, a perfectionist, a procrastinator. Maybe you identify as all 3, how you can see that these things are sometimes tethering you and the way that you can untether from them. Part of that is actually giving those pieces and parts of yourself a little love and recognizing that there's actually gifts that exist within these sides of you. I love that message from Dawn. And I'll repeat that question that she said that was so powerful. If I was here all alone today, there's nobody else around, what would I choose to do? Ask yourself this question, see what comes up for you. There is a clue for you coming home to yourself. And what is it that you really love to do? There's a huge clue for you in this question. So ask yourself this question today. Allow some time and some space for an answer to surface and see what comes up for you. I would absolutely love to hear. If you want to share, I would love to hear what comes up for you. You can send me an email, hello@jenlist.com. let me know. What is that thing? What is that thing that you would do? If you're on Spotify, you can actually just answer it right here in the post below, where you can do the Q&A on Spotify. So if you want to answer right there, I would love to hear it. And also tune into the Thursday thread, because I have a lot of things that I'm looking forward to threading out of this episode with Dawn. So stay tuned for that on Thursday. I look forward to catching you on the flip side. You just keep shining your magical unicorn light out there for all to see. I'll see you next time.